Uh, I would like to say that the topic of my presentation, as you could observe, is different than in the papers presented before, because I have extended the chronological scope of my project, and you will see during my paper why. I found this is very interesting also, and strengthened my main argument. Okay, I will start. I will speak about the first Latin ruler who assumed the royal title, and it was Baldwin of Boulogne. His coronation took place in Bethlehem on December 25, 1100, and that event sparked considerable debate among the Crusaders. The act of coronation was inherently sacral, elevating the anointed king above other members of the political elite. Consequently, Baldwin's adoption of royal title was a pivotal moment in the newly established Kingdom of Jerusalem, representing an ideological novelty. Notably, his predecessor and brother, Godfrey of Bouillon, had refrained from taking the title of king, as he and many other crusaders opposed such a designation for both political and religious reasons. Thus, Baldwin I faced substantial internal opposition, particularly from Patriarch Dagobert Daimbert of Pisa and Tancred, Lord of Tiberias and Haifa. The choice of Bethlehem as the coronation site was justified by the belief that the ceremony should not take place in Jerusalem itself, where Christ had worn the crown of thorns and suffered death. Given this ideological and political background, an essential question arises. What measures did Baldwin and his successors undertake to consolidate royal power over Jerusalem and to embed the city's significance within the ideological framework of kingship in Outremer? The aim of this presentation is to address this question through an analysis of sigillographic sources complemented by numismatic evidence. This approach offers a broader perspective on the political culture of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the evolving concept of kingship in the Latin East. This paper argues that the idea of ruling over Jerusalem and ever increasing emphasis placed on its sanctity by the monarchs played a crucial role in shaping collective perceptions of kingship in Outremer during the 12th and 13th centuries. The ideological foundation of kingship in Jerusalem was articulated in a document granting privileges to the newly established bishopric of Bethlehem. This charter contains a unique royal title compared to other royal charters. This is I, Baldwin, elected by the exultant clergy, the nobles, and the people, and established as the first king of the Franks by divine will, have ascended the throne of Jerusalem. This passage reveals both the circumstances of Baldwin I's election, achieved through the consent and support of local elites, and the devotional formula that underscores his divine mandate. It represents a literal expression of the legitimacy of his rule, grounded in his broad social endorsement and divine sanction. The passage also explicitly emphasized the centrality of the Jerusalem throne within the community over which the king presided. Further, Radulf of Caen, writing between 1112 and 1118, in Gesta Tancredi, further legitimized Baldwin's authority by attributing to him descent from Charlemagne and asserting that he was divinely destined to sit upon the throne of David. It is also significant to note that the formation of the royal title illustrates the intent to highlight the concept of royal authority over Jerusalem. Under Baldwin I, the title initially appeared as Gratia Dei Rex Hieroslymitanus. Later variations under his successors included Dei Gratia Rex Hierusalem Latinorum, and by the reign of Baldwin III, this formulation has been standardized, and by the time of Guy of Lusignan, it had evolved into Per Dei Gratiam in Sancta Rex. This demonstrates a clear tendency to emphasize the importance and sanctity of Jerusalem in the representation of kingship in Outremer, as reflected in king's documents and titles formulas. Apart from royal charters, another category of sources crucial to this discussion is seals, which, when evaluated in their proper historical context, serve as tools for understanding a ruler's safe image, the portrayal of his kingship to his subjects and adversaries, and his legitimacy as a sovereign. The foundation of this analysis is the catalogue of seals from the Kingdom of Jerusalem compiled by Hans Eberhard Mayer and Claudia Soda. Their corpus includes 81 royal seals dated to the 12th and 13th centuries. Mayer's detailed study clarified two crucial points regarding the origins of Jerusalem's royal seal. Firstly, it was created during the reign of Baldwin I. Secondly, for the next 120 years, from Baldwin I to John of Brienne, even after the loss of Jerusalem, the kings of Jerusalem continued to use the same seal introduced by Baldwin I, with only minor modifications. Mayer and Sod's comprehensive analysis has conclusively demonstrated that the seal of the medieval kings of Jerusalem originated during Baldwin I's reign and was not the result of a collective effort by the royal dynasty over an extended period. A significant political factor shaping Baldwin I's ideology of rule was his conflict with the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Dagobert of Pisa. Dagobert sought political dominance, as illustrated by his letter from April 1100, in which he entirely omitted any mention of Godfrey of Bouillon. In this letter, Dagobert presented himself as by the grace of God, Patriarch of Jerusalem, servant of the helpers of the Holy Sepulchre, conspicuously making no reference to Godfrey or even alluding on his existence. Exploiting the prince's weak political position, Dagobert demanded the Tower of David and secured the cession of Port of Jaffa. During Easter 1100, he further extracted a promise that Jerusalem would be transferred to him upon the conquest of other cities in Palestine. Dagobert, though not a papal legate, usurped the authority to govern Jerusalem as the spiritual leader of the territories captured by the Crusaders. After Godfrey's death in July 1100, Dagobert and Tancred attempt to seize power by calling upon Bohemond of Antioch. However, their plans were thwarted by the faction of Domus Ducis Godefridi, which supported Baldwin of Boulogne. The Lotharingian knights took control of the Tower of David, awaiting their candidate. Baldwin entered Jerusalem around November 9, 1100, consolidated his faction, and isolated Dagobert in a monastery of Monzion. On December 21, after turning his domain, Baldwin returned to the city, and 4 days later, he was crowned in Bethlehem as a result of a compromise. Albert of Aachen reports that Baldwin chose Bethlehem to avoid wearing a golden crown in the very place where Christ had worn a crown of thorns. This decision may have placated the clergy, which had previously opposed a coronation in Jerusalem. Within just 1 year from Godfrey's election in 1099 to December 1100, the elites of the new state deemed the establishment of monarchy essential. This shift was influenced by the conflict between the faction of Domus Ducis Godefridi and Dagobert's allies, which threatened to undermine the influence of the House of Boulogne. In the given political context, it is essential to emphasize that the coronation in Bethlehem and the adoption of the royal title aimed to legitimize Baldwin I's rule, highlight its divine origin, and enhance the monarch's prestige. Within a relatively short period, Baldwin I consolidated his position among the Crusaders, and through his royal title, emphasizing his connection to the Holy City, presented himself as the sole ruler of Jerusalem. This is evident also in the iconographic program displayed on his royal seal. The royal seal was introduced at the very beginning of Baldwin's reign, as there is evidence of a charter sealed and issued in his name as early as 1102-1103. As Robert Gould has demonstrated, in the absence of an organized chancery, the seal was Baldwin I's personal creation, in which he was actively involved in designing the iconographic imagery and legend to reinforce the inseparable bond between the monarch and the Holy City. The obverse of the seal features a crowned king seated on a throne, holding an orb with a cross in his left hand and a long scepter with a cross in his right hand. The Latin legend inscribed on the seal reads, Baldvinus Dei Gratia Rex Jerusalem. The iconography of Baldwin's obverse seal was unmistakably influenced by Western seal traditions, particularly those of the Salian kings and emperors, and to a lesser extent the French captains. This influence is not surprising, given Baldwin I and the Domus Godefridis close ties to the Salian and Capetian chancery traditions through their dynastic connections with the Counts of Boulogne and the Dukes of Lower Lotharingia. One major distinction between the Kingdom of Jerusalem and Western European monarchies was the early adoption of a double-sided seal. The reverse of the royal seal prominently features three monumental structures, both highly symbolic and representative of reality. Jerusalem is depicted through crenellated walls and a gate, behind which, from left to right, stand first the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, recognizable by its characteristic edicule, considered the most significant shrine of Christendom and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Secondly, the Tower of David with two domes. Its current appearance results from later Ottoman modifications, but the Tower of David symbolizing royal authority over the city and serving as a symbolic link between biblical Davidic kingship and the newly established Frankish monarchy in Jerusalem. And thirdly, the Templum Domini, the Dome of the Rock, crowned with a cross, converted and reinterpreted by the Crusaders as the second most important Christian shrine in Jerusalem, establishing a symbolic connection to the biblical temple. The Latin legend inscribed on the reverse reads Civitas Regis Regum Omnium, a reference to Christ's title as the King of all kings. The inscription novelty is striking. The formula Regis Regum Omnium, King of all kings, alludes to the ancient biblical and Christian term King of all kings, originally used to describe Persian rulers and later transformed in the New Testament as a designation for God, specifically Christ. This inscription appears only one another time, 70 years later, in Chronicon, the principal historical account of the Kingdom of Jerusalem written by William of Tyre. Writing in the 1170s at the invitation of King Amalric, William incorporated the exact phrase into his account of Pope Urban II's famous speech at the Council of Clermont. In William's version, the Pope vividly described the desecration of Jerusalem, the city of the King of all kings, and its holy shrines. The use of the seal's inscription by William was undoubtedly intentional. As an experienced chronicler and close confidant of two kings of Jerusalem, he was well informed about the history of the kingdom's administration. Furthermore, as head of King Baldwin IV Royal Chancery, he was certainly familiarized with the royal seal itself. The highly irregular iconography and inscription of the riverside highlight the distinctive character of the entire seal, which represents another expression of a unique concept of kingship in Jerusalem. Notably, Baldwin I's royal seal title, ideologically linked to the symbolism of the holy city of Jerusalem, remained stable and did not undergo significant changes over time. Drawing on my findings concerning Baldwin I's royal title, it is worth mentioning that his phragistic title does not always align with his diplomatic title. The latter was subject to greater fluctuation, likely influenced by the fact that the royal chancery, headed by a chancellor, was only established in 1115. The standardization of diplomatic formulas occurred around the mid-12th century during the tenure of post of chancellor by Radulf under the reign of Baldwin III, when an emphasis on the sanctity of Jerusalem became more pronounced in the royal title. The king's even stronger association with the Holy City was the direct result of the civil war for control of Jerusalem, fought between Baldwin III and his mother, Queen Melisende, and thus the title Rex in Sancta Civitas Jerusalem began to appear. Nevertheless, it should be noted that the depiction of the monarch against the characteristic architectural backdrop of Jerusalem on the royal seal became a defining feature for Baldwin I's successors on the throne of Jerusalem. Despite technological advancements allowing for less schematic and more detailed representations, the seal of other kings continued to follow the same iconographic model introduced during Baldwin I's reign. This continuity underscores the ideological framework of kingship of Jerusalem. And as we could observe, this is the seal of Baldwin II. This is the seal of Queen Melisende with the same ideological program. This is the seal of Baldwin III, still the same presentation. This is the seal of King of Amalric. This is the seal of Baldwin IV, Amalric II, and seal of John of Brienne. Also, this is these two last kings did not rule in Jerusalem itself because it was under control of Muslims. So even without Jerusalem, the kings of Kingdom of Jerusalem presented themselves at the background of these three monumental Jerusalem structures. Furthermore, the royal seal likely influenced the iconographic representations on the seals of local nobles, who also began to depict their authority against characteristic architectural features of the domains they ruled. Examples include the seal of Haifa, Castrum Haifa, the almost identical to the royal seal of Lord of Ramla, Baldwin III, Civitas Rama, the seal of Hugh of Lepuiset from Jaffa, and those of the lords of Ibelin, Balian II, Domini Ibalirini, and Raoul Castrum Iberini, and among others, including those used by Renard de Chatillon as ruler of Transjordan. The persistence of the royal imagery and the emphasis on the Tower of David as a symbol of royal authority and are further confirmed by coinage. The Tower of David appears on the coins of Baldwin III and Baldwin IV. On royal obols and deniers, the Tower of David is depicted on the reverse with the description "the Jerusalem," or rather "the Jerusalem." Baldwin III coin bears that inscription Turis on the obverse and David on the reverse. However, on the denarius of Amalric appears the Holy Sepulchre on the reverse with the inscription the Jerusalem. In comparison with coins depicting the Tower of David, the placement of the Holy Sepulchre perhaps indicates an emphasis on a different, more pious iconographic content associated with a holy place rather than with a military, purely royal object. In conclusion, the royal seal of Jerusalem maintained an unchanging representation of kingship over more than a century. That seal was designed to proclaim the kingship as an event of monumental, almost messianic proportions, the proclamation of a lay Christian king in Jerusalem for the first time in history. The inscriptions Rex Jerusalem and Civitas Regis Regum Omnium, King of Jerusalem, City of the King of Kings, emphasize the city's historical and spiritual significance as the seat of biblical kingship and the site of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. However, it must be remembered that this seal was created in a period that necessitated the continuous affirmation and reinforcement of royal authority, not only in the face of external threats, but also in response to intense conflict with the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the clergy of Outremer. Numismatic evidence further corroborates the inseparable link between kingship and the dominion over Jerusalem, while simultaneously highlighting the city's divine character. Thank you very much for your kind attention.